Here is your week 5 Latin follow-up. So just a reminder, over here they highlighted and previewed pages 22 through 26, and we were going to discuss those concepts in week 5. So basically we have the indirect object, a little bit of diagramming, some more vocabulary to discuss, and prepositions, making sure we understand which case to use with which preposition. And that was really it for this week. So let me walk you through what we did. So first I had 5 sentences. I don't know if you can see them. These 5 sentences put up on the board, prepared ahead of time. They were not labeled or anything marked up on them. I got them from exercise 20 right here. So those are the ones that I chose. Or from that exercise anyway. So I just had them observe. And of course somebody figured out right away that they all had the same basic sentence pattern, almost all of them. We have a subject, a verb, a direct object, and an indirect object. Sentence 5 down here was different. I did that on purpose so they could see the difference when we do not have an indirect object. So we reviewed our question confirmation, asking the question, the subject and the verb did what? The answer to that is the direct object. Then we asked 2 or 4, and the answer to that is the indirect object. So we just worked through labeling each of those. I had I had like 4 different students come up, and they each took turns labeling the sentence to see if they could get it down. So we did that very quickly. We looked at how the Latin text has us diagram this particular sentence pattern. It's a little different than what we did in Essentials because the indirect object hangs off the end right here. So we reviewed our new vocabulary, and then we practiced with this sample sentence right here. So let's go there. So I had this sentence on the board. We went through our list of this is what we do. We find the verb, underline the ending once if it's singular, twice if it's plural. Then we went and circled all of the endings, and I had the students kind of answer these questions. I called names for this. We identified the declension and gender, the case and number for each of the nouns, and we listed all of the possibilities, and then we decided which one it was not going to be. Once we determined the correct case, we labeled across the top here of our sentence, and using this information it helped us to correctly identify the English translation. So after we did that, we practiced down here with exercise 19. Again, same thing, go to the verb first, identify if it's singular or plural, circle all of the noun endings, label each noun with the declension and gender, and then we walked through each of them and we listed all the possibilities for case and number. And noticing that we had a nominative singular here and then a nominative plural there. And I asked the students, do we have 2 subjects? Is it possible to have 2 subjects? What's going on here? And then, because I've been trying to hound this rule, the fact that subject and verb must agree in number, so somebody will figure out that, well, we have a singular verb, so our subject must be singular, so it cannot be this one, so we crossed it out. Once we identified this as our subject, we labeled it as subject noun. So then we asked, we looked through the rest of them. At this point, we hadn't been introduced to the ablative, so somebody said, well, it can't be ablative because we don't have any prepositions yet. So good job there. Dative means it must be the indirect object. Down here, we knew it wasn't nominative plural, but then we had to decide was it genitive singular or dative singular. So somebody said, well, actually I asked them, is it possible to have 2 indirect objects in a sentence? We came up with a couple of sample sentences where yes, indeed, you can have 2 indirect objects. but we noticed that there would have been a conjunction like an and or something between them. So that means this one can't be dative, so it must be the genitive, which tells me it's possessive. And then over here, oops, I forgot to cross that out, but again, the subject has to be singular, so the nominative cannot be plural, so that should be crossed out, which means that we would have a direct object there. Once we have this labeled, it makes it easy to go through and correctly translate it. It's really important that we have the vocabulary memorized so we can just look at it right away and recognize that the subject, God, gave, subject gave what? The direct object, rewards, to the friends of Mary. So anyway, hope that makes sense. Somehow or another in this conversation, the question came up of who versus whom. I'm not sure. So we had a little moment here where we explained subjective case versus objective case and how to know who versus whom. At that point, it was time to look over at our prepositions. And I do have the students, they take turns. I have them actually read this text out loud and see if they can explain it to me. Instead of me teaching them, I want them to try to teach themselves. So they will try to explain what's going on here. We made some observations. Somebody noticed that there was accusative and ablative here. And I believe we had, let's see here. I put a couple of these on the board right here. And we noticed that, lo and behold, this one had ablative and this one was accusative. And that was a little mind-blowing at first, realizing that, oh, wait a minute, object of preposition can take the accusative case. We thought that was direct object. Anyway, so we came to the conclusion that we would just have to memorize those. And there they are. In the vocabulary, it will tell you if it's accusative or ablative, and you just have to know it. So we came up with some little tricks to help us remember which ones are ablative and which ones are accusative. Some people said, well, the short words are ablative, the long words are accusative. Somebody said the P's were accusative, the others were ablative. Whatever works for you. Anyway, that was kind of all we had time for. I don't even know that we had time this particular week to play a game. So anyway, one other note here is these nouns can be kind of crazy, and take the time to identify, I wrote it over here on the Post-it note, identify the endings. Remember, if the genitive singular ends with the AE, you're in first declension. That's pretty much always feminine unless it names a man person. Then we had the I with the macron gives you second declension because it ends in an oos, those are masculine. We discovered these nouns will name a person. We're talking about a Gaul or a Roman. Up here, these nouns will name a place. So we're talking about the location Gaul or the location Rome. Make sure you realize that the stem is different. Here, G-A-L-L-I. Down here, G-A-L-L. Up here, we have R-O-M as your stem. And down here, we have R-O-M-A-N as your stem. So, anyway, hope this is helpful. Have a great week.